And I'm here today to give you an overview of the comprehensive portfolio that's required in your master's program in special education. So some of you ask, why a portfolio? Well, we have you develop a portfolio for a few reasons. One, it allows us to have a holistic view of your teaching skills, and it also provides you a way to select and show off your best work. So unlike a written exam or a class assignment, this gives you a chance to select and use your best judgment and choose things that best reflect you as a teacher overall. It also gives us a permanent document that showcases all of your end of program knowledge and skills. I want to point out to you or remind you of our professional ethical principles and practice standards. As you know, the Council for Exceptional Children, or CEC, is the professional organization that's aligned to our accreditation and national recognition. They have a set, as our guiding organization, they have a set of standards for ethical practice. This should be evident in your philosophy of education for this portfolio, but it also should be reflected in your daily teaching practice. It has professional preparation standards. These are what our program is organized around and also what your portfolio will be organized around. There are 7 standards, and they are broken down into both initial preparation standards, so for beginning teachers, and specialty sets. In the master's program, we require that all candidates address the initial preparation standards. And we do that for a few reasons. One is because some of you in the program may not come to us with formal preparation in special education from an accredited or nationally recognized program. So we want to make sure that all of our candidates, by the time you exit your master's program, we have a good, solid initial preparation foundation. Then, in addition to that, because this is a graduate program, we then break down and extend that preparation into one of your 4 areas of concentration. So when you came into our program, you selected one of these 4 areas: mild moderate disabilities, severe disabilities, emotional or behavior disorders, or gifted education. So in addition to your global preparation as a special educator, you're going to go a little deeper into your area in your portfolio. So all of your artifacts and evidence that you're providing in this portfolio should really be focused around your. So when you start organizing and setting up your portfolio, you're going to organize it by the 7 CEC standards. At the beginning of each standard, you're going to present to the reviewer a reflective statement. Now, think of the reflective statement as your opportunity to introduce the reviewer to your work in that standard. So sometimes I tell students to pretend that you were standing in front of us and you wanted to walk us through your artifacts, what you selected and why. So there are 2 pieces to the reflective statement. One, which is usually just the first paragraph, is where you introduce the standard to us, and you go on and give us an overview of the things that you've selected to demonstrate competence for that standard. And then in that description, you're going to analyze how the things you selected specifically demonstrate that you have those areas of knowledge and skills. So you're strongly encouraged to make those references explicit by citing the specific competencies for the standard. A lot of students may struggle with just how to organize. So I've kind of gone a little deeper for you, And here's a suggested format. Now, it is your reflective statement. You can organize it any way you would like, but this format tends to be one that is very easy for the reviewers to follow. First, in the first paragraph, think about the way you learned how to write an essay, maybe in junior high or high school, where you have an introductory paragraph, a few paragraphs as the body, a concluding paragraph, and then your references. We want you to follow good writing practices in this as well. So you're going to give us an introductory paragraph, and I would suggest that you provide a very brief summary of the standard and just give an overview of that standard so that we know that you understand that standard, particularly as it relates to your area of specialization. Then after that paragraph, you're going to go into an overview of the artifacts you're including. Be sure that you link your artifact to the key elements in the initial preparation standards or the competencies in those specialty sets specific to your area of specialization. Now, it says if you're in the mild, moderate disability special education area, you might state something like, and I have an example for you on the next page. After you go through your body where you're introducing all and justifying all of your artifacts in relation to the standards, you're going to write a concluding paragraph and then you're going to give us your references. So what might the statements in your body look like? Now, in a minute we're going to talk about artifacts, and sometimes students will use the same artifact to demonstrate multiple standards. So this is the example that I've given. Now, this is far from a complete reflective statement. This is just a few sentences about one particular artifact, the unit plan artifact that in my fictional portfolio I've chosen. So I wrote, in Standard 3, I described my unit plan artifact to demonstrate my ability to implement both general and specialized curricula. So in this statement, I'm writing about Standard 4, but I also used the unit plan in Standard 3. In the same artifact, I also engaged students in evaluating their performance, which is key element 4.4. By conferencing with students and teaching them to track their own progress, I'm providing both feedback and engaging them in the assessment process, which has been shown to have a positive impact on academic progress in this population. Then I list a professional resource. This artifact also demonstrates my ability to modify assessments to accommodate the unique abilities and needs of individuals with exceptionalities, which is IGC.4.S3. So this is an example of a few sentences, and I've done several things in this. I've said to the reviewer, okay, here's my unit plan artifact. You already saw this in Standard 3, and when you looked at it in Standard 3, you were being asked to look at my ability to implement general and specialized curricula. But in this same artifact, in this same unit plan, I want you to also look at the assessment piece, because Standard 4 is assessment. So in the same artifact, the unit plan artifact, I also want you to look at my assessment portion of that. In that portion, I engage students, and I've described in that artifact how I help students evaluate their own performance. And so in that unit plan, I would expect, as the reviewer, when I pull it up in your assessment section, I would see something where you describe how you conference with students, how you have them track their own progress. You may have some kind of system or a page that you use with your students where they track their progress, and you would describe how you help them do that. I would also expect to see, because of the last sentence here, that you have in that assessment some kind of way that you've modified the assessment for different students who may have different abilities or disabilities. So this is an example of how you could introduce your artifact. You could distinguish that I saw it as the reviewer both in Standard 3 and I'm seeing it here in Standard 4. And then I'm linking it to the key element 4.4, which is in the initial preparation standards. And I'm also linking it to the individualized general education curriculum standards, which is what that IGC means. Point 4 means standard 4, S3 means skill 3. Whole should be submitted and uploaded into TK20 using either Microsoft Word, or you can submit it as a PDF. You want to make sure that whatever format you're using, the reviewer will be able to download and open. Most reflective statements are anywhere from 2 to 5 type pages depending on the standard. Some are longer and some are shorter. Use a standard font. Times New Roman or Arial is preferred, 10 or 12 point font, and a 1-inch margin. Again, this is APA format, so you should follow APA format. All right, so what is an artifact? So artifacts are just pieces of evidence that you're going to select that document that you've mastered that particular standard. Now, you will notice when you start reading through those CEC standards that there are several competencies listed in the specialty sets. There are not as many in the initial set. In the initial, they're called key elements, and I believe maybe 6 or 7 are the most that they have. But there are dozens of them in the specialty set. So when we're looking at your artifacts that you've selected for a particular standard, you should not have an artifact for each competency. Rather, we're looking at your artifacts collectively for that standard to see if they address most of the key elements and most of the competencies. So you're not going to have dozens and dozens of artifacts per standard. You're going to select, remember, your best work that holistically, when I look at all the artifacts you selected for standard 1, for example, collectively, the artifacts that you've selected for standard 1 should address standard 1 holistically. It should not address each and every key element and competency. So we're looking at these as a whole. So you may have some artifacts that address multiple competencies. So you may have multiple things referenced in your reflective statement. Artifacts are things that you have developed, so they're not necessarily things that you've adopted. Please don't use commercially prepared things as your artifacts unless you have modified them significantly. You should really only include things that were developed by you. So some samples of things that you might choose are student work samples, assignments that you've completed in your program, rating scales or evaluations done by your supervisors, videotapes, audio tapes, letters, and so on and so on. If you are struggling with knowing what to select as an artifact, you can always talk to your advisor and get some input on that. Number of artifacts that are required. However, there are some artifacts that are required. So we're not going to tell you how many things you should upload for each standard, but in the portfolio guidelines, which you can access by clicking the link that's provided in this module, there are some that are designated with an asterisk. Those are required. Now, in rare cases, there are sometimes that we've changed a course a little bit, changed some assignments a little bit, and if there is something with an asterisk by that you do not have, you should contact your advisor and talk to them about an appropriate substitution for that. So we would suggest that you use the portfolio guidelines to start gathering some of your artifacts. Now, you should use professional judgment and your professional opinion based on the things you've learned in your program to choose the number and type of artifacts. A lot of artifacts, or choosing several artifacts, does not necessarily mean a better portfolio. again, have to have an artifact for each competency listed. Rather, you should select your artifacts that look at your knowledge and skill for that standard as a whole. And you need to really, really make sure that the things that you select or the evidence that you provide to us relates to your area of concentration or your elective area. So if you are in the severe disabilities elective area, your artifact should reflect your work and your knowledge and your skills with that population. Now sometimes, and this is especially true for artifacts that you use across different standards, sometimes if it's a very large artifact like a unit plan or something very large and you're only wanting the reviewer to look at one particular section, sometimes we have had students find it helpful to put a little brief introductory statement for particular artifacts. For example, if you have a unit plan and you have it uploaded in Standard 3 and you have it uploaded in Standard 4, when you upload it in Standard 3, you may put a little 2 to 3 sentence saying, for this standard, I want to draw your attention to the lesson plans. And on 4, you might put an introductory statement and say, I want to draw your attention to the assessment section. This should be done in the original file, not as an additional file. And sometimes, like I said, people will put a text box or something like that that draws the reviewer's attention. So if you do use an artifact, and you may use an artifact to satisfy more than one standard, you need to make sure that the reviewer knows exactly what we're looking at in that same artifact that's different for one standard versus another. Something that's compiled of several documents, so whenever you can put them into one file. It's strongly encouraged that most of your artifacts not exceed 10 type pages. If it is a large document, again, we strongly encourage you to put a note there drawing the reviewer's attention to the part of that you want us to look at. This is especially true in things like unit plans or other large resource guides, sometimes same thing. It's very helpful. If you have artifacts that have identifiable information in that, you need to have a signed release also included with that artifact. You can also just remove identifying information, blacking out a student's name or things like that, making sure your videos don't show student faces. If you do those kinds of things, you do not have to have a release. But anytime there's anything that's identifiable, you must have a release with that artifact. Portfolio into TK20, and it only supports certain video formats, so I encourage you to kind of plan ahead and verify that the format that you are able to capture video in is compatible with TK20. Also, we don't want large or long video files, so again, you should crop your video to no longer than maybe 10 minutes, and it should focus on the specific thing that you want us to attend to for that specific standard. Now, in this instance, when you do use a video as an artifact, you should accompany it with a written document telling us what the relevance is to the standard, if that is not explicitly described in your reflective statement. Now, again, whenever you're writing, not just your reflective statement, but any writing, we want to make sure that you have the highest level of professionalism and you're following APA guidelines. Excuse me. You're using standard English. Again, no identifiable students, and you're going to communicate in a professional manner, avoiding judgments or derogatory comments about others, students, parents, teachers, schools, administrators, things like that. When you're using pseudonyms, it's not only for students, it could also be for other teachers and schools. So we don't want to have anything identifiable in your portfolio without written releases from those people. One more tip, I'm going to go back. Well, I'm just going to tell you, for your artifacts, before you upload them in TK20, I would suggest having a file on your computer for each standard. So have 7 files on your computer. Start organizing your artifacts, kind of shuffling them out into the correct folder. And then I would make sure that you use file names that are very descriptive so that your reviewer can find that. Sometimes when we upload to TK20, they don't go in the order that you identified, so having reflective statement 1 as your file name is very helpful. If you have an artifact that in your reflection you're calling it your unit plan, have the file name be the unit plan. So however you're referencing it in your reflective standard, if you could have that as your file name, that's very helpful. So that just goes to professionalism and organization of your portfolio. Portfolio is reviewed. You're going to have at least 2 faculty members review your portfolio. They're selected based on their expertise in your content area, and you do not get to choose or select your faculty evaluators. That's done by the faculty, and it's based on lots of different things. But you do have people with expertise in your elective area that are reviewing your portfolio. So we have at least 2, and then if there's not agreement from your first 2 faculty members about your evaluation, say one says that you pass and one says you don't pass, then we add a 3rd faculty member into the review. We announce the due dates for your portfolios within the first 3 weeks of the semester, and that's done via an email to your official USM email address. You can get email through USM to a different address, but you have to do that through SOAR. Also, it's important that you know that portfolios are not due at the end of the semester. They're due about 3 weeks before the last day of class, and that's because faculty have 2 weeks to review portfolios, and then if we need a 3rd reviewer, we give that person an additional week, so it takes about 3 weeks to get these evaluated and scores reported back to students and to the graduate school. Because of that, we cannot accept any late portfolios. So they are due by 5 p.m. usually on a Friday, usually the 3rd Friday before the last day of classes. And if you miss that deadline, we do not accept your portfolio. Once the evaluations are complete, the committee chair uses the feedback to determine if you have passed the portfolio or not. The 7 standards is rated on a 4-point scale, 1 being unacceptable, 2 marginal, 3 mastery, 4 exemplary, and there's a description of each of those levels there. Because different standards have different levels of complexity and different importance, we weight them a little bit. Standard 1 is 10%, 2 is 10%, 3 is 10%. Standard 4 is 20%, Standard 5 is 25%, 6 is 10%, and 7 is 15%. So those are the weights for your overall score. So to pass your portfolio, you have to have an overall average of 3 or higher, And you can have no ratings of 1 for anything. So if you get a rating of 1 on any standard, you automatically do not pass your portfolio. And you must have at least 3 or higher from 2 faculty members on standards 4 and 5. So you could have some 2s if you have higher scores. You cannot have a 2 on 4 or 5, and you cannot have any 1s. So sometimes, for various reasons, either something's unclear or a reviewer didn't see something, we have differences in ratings. So anytime there's a 2-point discrepancy among the reviewers and that results in a person failing, then we give a third review for that standard. So we say something's going on if one reviewer gives a 2 and one reviewer gives a 4, and that discrepancy caused you to fail the portfolio, we will pull in a third reviewer. Also, sometimes if you're kind of on the edge, if the overall average for the first 2 reviewers is a 2.75 to 2.99, we will have a third review. We do not evaluate portfolios during the summer months. That's for several reasons. One, we found that when students were developing and submitting portfolios over the summer, because faculty are not often around in the summer, students were not getting the support they needed. So we also have a difficult time sometimes making up evaluation committees because not all faculty are at the university in the summer. So that doesn't mean that you can't graduate in the summer, but if you do graduate in the summer, your portfolio is due during the spring due dates. So that's something to keep in mind if you have your plan of study and you are anticipating graduating during a summer semester. You need to work on this a little ahead of time. If you do not pass, and this is true for spring and summer graduates, for those who do not pass the portfolio, you'll have to defer graduation to fall, and you'll have to enroll in 1 hour in the fall semester of SPE 797. To think about and a lot to do. We are here to help you. You can schedule an appointment at any time with your advisor, and your advisor can help walk you through this, help you talk through some of this. Sometimes students want a little more formal assistance. SPE 797 is available not only to those who aren't successful, but to anybody who wants some extra, more structured time. We have had students who said, I want to register for that class because I know I just want to set some deadlines, some early deadlines for myself. And so that is always helpful. That is not required, it's just something that's available to you. But the best advice I can give you is please do not wait till the last minute. The most successful students collect artifacts throughout their program. They do that thing like where they set up the folders and they start shuffling their assignments. They use those portfolio guidelines with the table that you can download and print to say, oh, this is suggested artifact from SPE 770. I'm going to save that in my standard folder for that so that I'll have it and I won't lose it, and I'll have it for me. So I would suggest at the end of each semester you pull out that table, you look at the classes you took, and if there are any suggested or required artifacts, you save them over into a folder for your portfolio. Again, at any time, if you would need some help or some input, please let us know, and we are here to help. And good luck to you.